The girl asked for one thing. She would die young anyway, but she didn't want to feel any pain. But her parents and others kept telling her not to say that. They asked her to be patient and stay with them longer, which was extremely selfish. She hoped that the girl standing next to her wouldn't be angry about the stupid thing she was saying, so she asked what she would do if she asked her to kill her. The girl next to her replied that she would ask her to wait until she found a way that would hurt her the least. And she would do it, even though she would be cursed by others and imprisoned, because she was more important to her. Opilia said that even if she was forgotten, at least she should remember and not forget. To bring her flowers to her grave every spring, and not to find a new close friend. The girl didn't want to die. She was very scared. She was the only daughter of the Marquis of Windrose, noble and blessed with a beautiful life, exactly a delicate lily. On her noble face, there was always a radiant smile like a flower when she was near those she cared for. And despite the difficult character of everyone around her, loved her. Next to her was a girl who had been brought from afar as a peer, so that she would always be there. Ophelia's friend, toy, and family, she was it. At first, Opilia mocked her with jealousy of her healthy body, but she was just a sick child. And if the girl was kicked out of the Marquise's house, she'd have to go back to a hard and poor life. So she was forced to do everything to stay close to Opilia, so she became her friend, family, and peace. That was why she did not do anything surprising now, because she knew the fate because of her past life, since this world was just a game. She vaguely remembered the details, but in the game, Opilia always dies, and it doesn't matter which route you choose. No capture target can save her. She dies decently every time, becoming only a precious memory in the hearts of the capture targets. So after a while, they fall in love with the Baron's daughter, who looks insanely like Opilia. However, no matter how strong the desire and longing for the dead girl was before, in any normal ending, the capture targets forget Opilia and truly love the Baron's daughter. The girl asked if she was so scared. Maybe she should have died with her, because even if she spends all her life, she won't be able to get even a crumb of what Opilia possessed. Opilia told her that she didn't want that because she felt sorry for her and asked her to do everything in her place, to dress beautifully, to travel, to eat good food, to ride, and to be loved. But she promised that if the girl dated some idiot, she would definitely come out of her grave. She was obliged to wear a wedding dress, and Opilia liked the idea that it would be full of little flowers that bloomed in the garden. The girl, however, realized that such a dress would not suit someone with a face as plain as hers. Opilia Windrose died on one of the last days of spring. She had insisted one night that she wanted to look at the flowers and had asked for the window to be opened, and a slight cold had been replaced by a fever. It seemed as if it would pass and care would help the fever, but every day it got worse. The temperature did not go down. Opilia constantly fainted. After a month of struggle with the disease, Opilia died. After the funeral, many people returned to the mansion, for most were more interested in the condition of the Marquise and Marquise, and few knew Opilia personally. Mr. Edmund came up to her, saying that it seems God loved disgusting jokes because those who don't care if Opilia is alive or dead continue to walk the earth. It was the eldest son of the Earl of Gloucester, the one who would get whatever he wanted no matter what, the vicious hyena who was dangerous to make his enemy. Amelia remembered that in the game, most of the bad endings in which the Baron's daughter was trapped involved him. Getting to know Opilia brought out his greed and unbridled temper. He even had a room full of Ophilia's things. In the bad ending, you can learn some of the nuances of his Ruth and the history of the Earl of Gloucester's family, and with their help, you can understand why Edmund became like this. The girl, on the other hand, didn't remember that, but in any case, she wasn't concerned with his secrets, and there was no point in worrying about the ones that rattled her nerves every time they met. They were approached by a fellow named Casio, who said that indeed the Lady Amelia standing before them was the one who knew Lady Opilia best. He talked like a gentleman, but he actually had the worst personality because he thought of people as things. Amelia was sure that he was not stirring to help her, but just to tease Edmund. After all, he didn't like her either. Casio asked why Edmund could not understand the true meaning of the lady's words, and he was ashamed to see how he pressed his feelings on the unfortunate lady. The girl, however, realized that it was impossible for him to just help her, for they loved Opilia to the point of madness and could not tolerate it. The reason why she was not sad at the funeral was that she knew that Opilia was destined to die and she was to take her place. She told the boys that this would not happen because she would never become a member of the Marquis Windrose family, as she had not seen much of the one who would take the position of heir. It was Laertes Hoff. Although he was the second son of the Hoff family, he had outstanding abilities and good character, and was a close relative of the Marquis of Windrose. If Opilia were well, he would become her fiancé and later the Marquis's son-in-law, for he is the last third target of the capture, in love with Opilia. She explained to the young men that the Marquis's wife would most likely insist on adopting Sir Laertes, for he was a promising knight with a fine pedigree and the right man to be the Marquis of Windrose's heir. They pretended not to know what she was talking about, but in truth, they were all quite clever, though they had often behaved foolishly since they had met Opilia. Did they think that was how they would get her attention? Or were they just attracted by the idea of a tragic affair with a girl who was about to die, just as Opilia had said? Since today was her funeral, she had to be polite. After all, Emilia had only come to the Marquis family because Opilia needed a friend, but now she was dead. She said that the Marquis would have a lot of worries when the funeral was over. Therefore, she must leave. The Marquise couldn't stop crying and had already fainted several times, and the Marquise, who had lost his only daughter, would be under the pressure of the question of an heir. So before the others cared about her, she must leave, and the men who treated her as a fly in their way, and Opilia would also breathe a sigh of relief. She realized that she would not stay because Opilia was gone, and there was no reason for her to remain in the Marquise's care. The Marquis called her daughter only to please Opilia, who considered her a sister, and she had enough money to live alone without starving. And without Emilia was the one who will take the empty place, because the poor daughter of the Baron, as 2 drops of water similar to the princess, will appear a little later. In the game, Emily expected the fate of a pathetic bug, trampled by 3 men. In any rut, it turns out that Emilia was jealous of the position and benefits of the still living Opilia that was proven. But she did not take the path of envy or blind worship, but became her friend. When she was about to leave, one of the boys asked her if she liked Sir Laertes. The girl did not know what they were talking about, for he was to be Ophilia's fiancé and the Marquis's successor. Laertes was the only one of the 3 targets of the capture who was polite to Emilia. It did not matter if she had feelings for him or not. Because he liked Opilia, her confession and attempts to attract attention could lead to unfortunate consequences. The girl had a dream. It was one of Sophia's memories of their walk where they sit together in the park discussing Casio. After talking to those 2, she fell asleep as if she had fainted. The princess had always said she was lonely, so they slept together as sisters. Now, they would never sleep together again. Emilia didn't hate those 3 so much. After all, Opilia only had her and she had Ophelia. It's not like they couldn't get even a fraction of her love. They wouldn't be able to forget her beauty, and the girl's death had affected them greatly. She went down to the dining room and met Sir Laer, who had come as quickly as he could. But as soon as he crossed the threshold, the Marquise fainted. But she could rely on him as if he were her own son. When she looked at Emilia, she would think of her dead daughter, and she might feel worse. She didn't know about the Baron's daughter, but she could never replace Opilia. She was uncomfortable in his company, though she had been before her friend's death, but now it felt much more vivid. She realized she needed to leave the mansion before Laer became heir. He asked her how she felt, but she didn't know what he was talking about, whether he was asking if Emilia remembered Opilia at the sight of the Marquis, and if she was in pain or something else. She could not say that she was fine, but she could not say that she was not fine. She did not feel that the world had collapsed, and there was no desire to immediately hang herself or die in any other way. After all, everyone who saw the suffering of the girl during her illness knew that the beautiful, fragile lady will not live long. Watching Opilia every day, she always remembered that this terrible day would come. When it did come, reality was more bearable than her grim expectations. Opilia was no longer in pain, no longer needing to pray that she would go to the next world without pain. The face of her precious friend that she had last seen was so beautiful and peaceful, as if she had just fallen asleep. Emilia didn't feel pain and didn't want to cry, only emptiness left in her, as if someone had made a hole in her chest on the left side, so that with every breath she felt the wind coming through her. She then went to her room where she was caught by a maid asking her what she was doing. Emilia replied that she was just tidying up, but that she was actually planning to run away. Opilia had long ago given her some ribbons, one of which Amelia had now given to the maid. After all, she had kept the one that was her favorite color, and that way the three of them would be tied together. The maid couldn't look at her, because she didn't understand how she could smile like that, because even just looking at Amelia made her sad. Despite the fact that Amelia did not cry at the funeral, the maid still knew that she did not cry even if it was hard for her, because she had served them for many years. Amelia had asked sincerely, and it would have been better if Opilia had agreed to let them die together. She told the Marquis that she was leaving, but the Marquise was in no condition to hear such news. She was sorry to part with the servants who had been kind to her, but leaving without telling anyone was the right thing to do now. When all her things were packed into the carriage, she climbed inside but suddenly froze. The guy waiting next to her asked if she was waiting for someone to say goodbye. Amelia didn't know what she was thinking, if she was waiting for someone to come and grab her and take her back to the manor, begging her to stay. But there was nothing there that belonged to her. Everything belonged to Opilia, and no one would come after her. After a while, the girl was already working in a coffee shop. One day, a guy who was a visitor made her a job offer, but she was not interested in it. The boy did not understand why she refused, because in this way can make a lot of money if you like the high-ranking gentleman, everything will work out. Even taking into account that she is not a bright beauty, her elegance is not inferior to the eye-catching appearance. He tried to explain to her that she could live not in a small room and run some coffee shop, but live richly, glasses full of champagne, sparkling chandeliers, dance with whomever you want. She worked in a shabby coffee shop on the outskirts of the capital, where even during the day does not penetrate the sunlight. At best, the guests are poor students and writers, as well as girls looking for a place to sit and talk with friends, because there are only 3 tables. It opens a little before lunch and closes before dark. Emily is the only employee. She didn't want to attract attention, so she told everyone that the owner of the coffee shop was a rich old lady, so it wasn't the first time she'd heard the offer to become someone's mistress. Jack, the 3rd son of a poor family who had difficulty buying food, came to her and ordered coffee because he was trying too hard to help her find a better place. She asked him to stop bothering her with strange conversations, and the guy left saying that he would come back. The girl closed the coffee shop and went to the market. For 2 years now, she has been living like a normal townie. After she left the mansion that morning, she visited all the jewelry stores in the capital, and on the recommendations of the coachman, she went to his acquaintance, a jeweler, asking the price of the jewelry she took with her, and went to the most conscientious store to sell. Amelia was very worried that they would lower the price because she was a young girl, but fortunately she was able to sell them for a good price. She put part of the money she received in the bank. With the other part, she bought a small building, the first floor of which turned out to be quite spacious, and the second floor was residential. She liked the fact that the house was moderately far from the city, and she could have a small vegetable garden. She could have bought a more luxurious house, but she wanted to live alone and not hire servants. When she was thinking about what to do on the first floor, she heard passers-by saying that it would be a good idea to open a coffee shop here. And although she ran the coffee shop only to have some fun and they had few guests, but she liked it. As a friend was driving a carriage down the street, a small child was in the way, and the coachman was not going to stop. So Amelia rushed to her in seconds and pulled her aside. After she accepted the gratitude, and from her mother she collected her food back into the basket, Laertes suddenly came out of the wagon, and she was very surprised by his presence. The girl came out of the wagon, saying that it was all her fault, for she did not want to cause any inconvenience, so she had rented a public wagon in which they were in too much of a hurry, and if it had not been for Amelia, the child would have been badly hurt. The moment they met eyes, Amelia realized that it was that girl, the protagonist of the game Elodie Danta. She remembered her conversation with the Marquis before leaving, to whom she informed that she planned to leave quietly so as not to disturb anyone. To which the man replied that if she changed her mind, she could tell him at any time. After all, this mansion is where she and Opilia grew up together for 10 years, and no one would tell her to leave. But the Marquis bought her from her parents, and she did her best. Their relationship is a bargain, and she has a drop of the same blood as the Marquis. She's not their daughter, and she can't be, but even sometimes empty words can make the heart grow fonder. She can't become Opilia. There is no one in the world who can replace her. She loved the girl, and she loved the place they grew up in. She remembered Ophilia's words that asked her to live a good life and be happy, to wear a long lace veil, to take a bouquet of beautiful flowers in her hands. Emilia wondered if she would be happy if she married a young gentleman she had never seen in her life. But if she stayed in the Marquis's family, she couldn't be happy trying to take Ophilia's place, even if she wished she could. It wouldn't work because she should leave behind what she couldn't wish for. Because she couldn't be a substitute, because in the future there would be a girl like her, a girl who didn't know if she would be happy or bitter. She thanked Emilia for her help, but since she didn't have anything with her, she wanted to thank her and wondered how they could get in touch. But Emilia said she would not accept the reward, for she did not want to go to any trouble. Her face was so similar to Ophilia's, but they were so different in character that it was hard to see the resemblance. When Elodie was going to the carriage, Laertes came up to Emilia and asked her why she was here and what she was doing. She replied that she was a free man and could do whatever she wished, and told Laertes to go back, for he was being rude to the lady he was escorting. His dark eyes, which had always been calm now like the deep sea, bore a trace of uneasiness. She had once wanted to take possession of those eyes, wanted to be the one to cause them to storm. She did not understand, since when he could be so easily made nervous, perhaps he thought that seeing a girl so like Opilia near him, she would criticize him like her friend. She said that if he thought that she was going to judge her, he was deeply mistaken, because Opilia had already left this world. The boy was addressed by the coachman, who said that if they did not go now, they would be very late. When they said goodbye, he called her Leah, which was the name he and Opilia had thought up when they were children, because that way they could be like twins. She didn't really like the abbreviation, but when they got older, they stopped calling each other that. So why did Laertes call her Leah? Emilia didn't remember how she got home after what had happened, but she was so tired that she fell asleep in a flash. When she woke up in the morning, she jumped out of bed because she realized she had overslept, and there was someone outside the coffee house waiting to open. It was Casio, who had been looking for her for so long, exploring every nook and cranny. And it turned out that she had been there all along. As he looked at her coffee shop, he noticed that she had a delightful talent for surprise. She asked not to be called lady, for she was not going to live like an aristocrat again. She worked hard, so she was used to it, and he hadn't tried to find out how she lived, but he'd overheard the locals talking about her, about a quiet coffee shop that opened whenever the owner wanted. The coffee tasted average. Even if the main clientele was poor and penniless, it still kept afloat. A place run by a single lady, pensive. He asked why she had run away after all. The girl replied that she didn't run away. She just left. She didn't know why he was so interested in her reasons for leaving, but she had originally stayed with the Marquis family just for Ophilia's sake. She just wanted to leave before she was asked to leave the manor. Emilia served him the breakfast she had prepared and wished him a good appetite. As she left, she knew that the man who was used to eating haute cuisine would not touch her food, but she saw him eating it all. Of all her many admirers, Opilia hated Casio most of all. His seemingly natural appearance, his good-naturedness, and elegant speech. Opilia hated everything about him. When he came, she was forced to meet him against her will, so Emilia was there to fulfill Ophilia's requests. Of course, she didn't want to interfere, but if Opilia wanted to hurt Casio, she could only obey her will. Once at a banquet organized for Opilia, Casio was rude to Emilia, so Opilia was very angry with him and he had to apologize. Casio asked her if it wasn't tiring for her to clean, prepare the place for opening and closing, and then serve the customers. She replied that since she was 8 years old, she had taken care of the most disgusting girl in the world, so it was no longer tedious. She waited to see if he'd tell her how she could talk like that about Opilia. After all, she'd had plenty of opportunities to see how beautiful she was, or something like that. Guy remembered that she was soon to be of age, and the official events for debutantes would begin in May, and now it was early March. And it was worth starting the preparations. In society, debut is an indicator of a family's wealth. Mostly debutantes are between 18 and 22 years old, depending on personal circumstances. Debut is not only about coming to the ball in a beautiful dress, because it is necessary to prepare the house in which the debutante and her entourage will stay, to find a suitable mentor able to help the girl understand the peculiarities of social life. And still, the hardest part remained, finding a date, a partner who accompanies the debutante throughout the evening and is the first to dance with her. The tradition of a cavalier for a debutante originates from the chivalric oath of a lady. The cavalier must have a status not lower than that of a debutante, and often the cavalier is the first on the list of candidates for marriage. So she was very surprised that Casio offered himself as her beau. She had no intention of making her debut, to which he replied that she should not worry because he would make all the arrangements. She knew about the wealth and skills of his family, but was forced to refuse because she is satisfied with her current life. The boy asked if she wanted to continue working in the coffee house, as he had heard rumors that she had shown mercy even to beggars. Wouldn't it have been easier to volunteer? And why she used a pseudonym instead of her real name? The boy was a little angry, but that was Amelia's whole point. He still didn't understand why she'd run away without telling anyone, and if she'd known what it was like for the Marquise. But she still didn't understand why Casio had decided to take up the question of her debut. Wasn't he the one who mocked her the most? And her bond with the Marquis was too fragile and ephemeral. After all, she was just the daughter of a viscount who didn't even have lands. The fellow said that even if she didn't like the idea of a debut, she should, and if she joined the social season this year, he wouldn't bother her anymore. Amelia, on the other hand, had no intentions of living as a girl from a higher family, so she didn't see the point of debuting and had already seen what people would say about it. Casio informed her that Opilia had left him a letter where she wrote about the girl's debut. If Amelia would make him her beau, he would give her the letter after the season was over. The guy noticed that the girl didn't react in any way when he promised her a boon and other words, but as soon as he mentioned Opilia, she instantly came to life. Amelia didn't know whether to believe him, since Opilia hated him so much. But was there any other reason for him to make such a generous offer to a girl he considered a speck in his eye? For if it was only to make her debut, there were other ways. Amelia said that if he confirmed the existence of the letter, she would do as he asked. Someone other than him must swear to witness their agreement, and she said he should swear on her name. She didn't choose Edmund because she likes him, because in the play he was madly obsessed with Opilia. He forced the Baron's daughter to change her name to Opilia, and after the Marquis's family adopts her, marries the unhappy girl. After which he locked the Baron's daughter in a room in which he collected Ophelia's things, and believed that Opilia did not die, but her soul moved into the body of the Baron's daughter. Casio also kept the heroine's life quiet, but treated the Baron's daughter as a substitute rather than going mad. When Casio asked her why she chose Edmund, the girl replied that it was the most suitable candidate in such a situation. But the boy didn't expect that, because in his opinion she hated Mr. Edmunds, and what she was going to do if they united and didn't give her the letter. The boy noticed that she knew them very well, and it was quite a long time since he had felt that anyone had spoken to him as an equal. The girl asked if he had been taking any strange medicines lately, for she thought he was not well and should call a doctor. He laughed and said that he could in any case confirm the existence of the letter, for she could not show it to Edmund. In return, if Amelia made her debut in May, he would send her a letter on the last day of the season. He then secured his words by swearing on Ophelia's name, and though he looked at other people as things, he considered her special and could not lie using her name. Casio asked if she realized that it was the end of March and they were late with the preparations. Naturally, she would have to stay at another house, and Amelia might not even try to resist if she didn't want to break her promise to Opilia. She asked for a day because if the cafe had to close for a while, she wanted to inform the regulars about it, because she was going to come back as this place was her home. But in fact, when she closed her eyes, she remembered her room with Ophelia's, the garden in which they walked every day, and even the fountain into which they pushed guests. But now the Marquis estate was just a memory, and she wished that the rumors that the commoner Emily was actually Ophelia's friend had not spread. But Casio told her not to even worry about it. After all, if he let the lady who was about to make her debut holding his hand be gossiped about, he would dishonor his family. He had heard about her coffee shop when he heard that there had been an unpleasant incident with a carriage not far away. People said that the perpetrators of the incident had only said a few words and left, Later deciding to find out more about the situation, he heard a young girl mentioned who was described as being very similar to Opilia. Since such coincidences never happened, he decided that he should investigate the incident thoroughly, for Sir Laertes was the kind of man who, though busy, would not leave the scene of an accident without a good reason. He explained that he had been looking for her himself because of the letter, but until yesterday, he hadn't been able to find any clues to why his pride had been hurt. The girl didn't even try to hide because she didn't think they would be looking for her. But he told no one else where he had found her, for if she had left no means of finding her even to the Marquis, he could not tell everyone about the place. She wished to conceal from Sir Laertes that she was going to make her debut, for she had left the estate and had nothing more to do with the Marquis's family. And since Sir Laertes would be accompanied by a beautiful woman who would suit him, she saw no need to tell him about herself. After all, who he was going to go on with did not really concern her anymore. She thought that Casio had misunderstood some things. He should not think that her feelings were weakness. She did not care about Sir Laertes because he was not Opilia. Thanks to Casio, she would be making her debut, though she didn't want to. And it was rude to talk about another man's partner behind his back. Or he wanted her to sob and wring her hands in front of him, to waver with jealousy and cling to phantom hope. The guy, on the other hand, listening to her, apologized and said that he looked too down on the depth of the lady's feelings. He kissed her hand, and the girl didn't understand what was going on. She was very surprised because she had never received such signs of attention, especially from such handsome men as Mr. Casio. The guy said he would ask her permission next time. He would be careful that the fragile heart of his precious partner did not jump out of his chest from surprise, and soon promised to come to pick her up. Casio didn't wait all day. That day, the coffee shop was open until late at night, so she could let all the regulars know that the coffee shop would be closed for a while. She packed up her things and let herself close her eyes for a second, and before it was even dawn as promised, Casio came to pick her up. She fell asleep on the way. He only woke her up when they arrived. The next day, an unknown guy stood at the door of the coffee shop. He asked Jack if he could tell anything about the girl who ran the coffee shop. The guy said that she left, and said that her grandmother's health in the village had deteriorated. She used to send most of the money she earned to the village, but now she had to visit her family. After listening, the boy said it couldn't be, because it sounded absurd. Jack still didn't understand how Emily could hide her acquaintance with such a handsome man, and it was clear to him why he couldn't even ask her out. Sir Alston asked him to let him know as soon as he saw Emily again for a reward. When they arrived at the manor, Casio offered to introduce her to everyone. The maid Kitty, who would take care of her, as well as the head maid Nellie and the butler William. The maids treated her with respect and genuine care without asking unnecessary questions. Amelia wondered how the guy introduced her that they acted like this. Did they know that the prominent unmarried heir of the Brahmandoff family had brought her, an unmarried maiden who didn't even have a fiancé to debut? He thought Emily was tired and suggested that she rest for a while, after which they could see each other for dinner. Amelia had heard a great deal about Countess McGinty and respected her deeply, so she would be very happy if Mr. Casio introduced her to her, though she wasn't sure she would like the Countess. Casio was already sure that she would like her because his aunt liked aged alcohol, old books and perfumes painstakingly created by craftsmen, and if there was a man brave enough to bribe his aunt, he would like to meet him. Amelia remembered the fairy tale Cinderella, the story of how an earl's daughter who is bullied by her stepmother and stepsisters is sent to a ball with the help of a fairy godmother. But she did not dream of a beautiful ball. If she had ever wished for anything, all her dreams disappeared the day Opilia died, because she did not want to be the main character or loved by everyone. All that she wanted someone already possessed. She was only afraid of one thing, to go mad with envy and try to take Ophilia's place. But the story changed a little, because she liked Opilia and loved her of her own free will. Even though she was sometimes jealous and angry, she remained sober. In the play, Opilia left without giving her heart to anyone. The world without Opilia became obsessed with the poor baron's daughter, and this tragedy resonated in the souls of other unfortunates. The one who cannot be resurrected, the one who was everyone's dream, hope and flower, the irreplaceable Opilia. The fact was that Amelia was cunning, and wrath was far more understandable than casual mercy, and she could not give herself to wounding those she disliked, so she'd rather they hate her with all their hearts. But Casio, She only said that it was hard for her to remember it because reality was not a child's fairy tale. And even if the princess died, the world would not fall apart and no one would die after her. So all they had to do was remember, because someday the mourning would end. The boy didn't like the idea of humility, and it seemed to hurt him because she said that nothing could be changed, and she didn't like him. But it seemed to Casio that she was not going to run away, because only those who have something to protect run away. She asked him to take her to her room, for she was a little tired, and then Casio showed her to her room and told her that the maid would come to help her before dinner, so she had time to rest. Emilia was about to close the door, but the boy stopped her, saying that his aunt was rather strict, but she was not one to tire the guests on the first day, so she need not worry. After all, unlike Emily, she was honest and didn't give people trouble on the spot. Then she closed the door and was alone with herself in the spacious and well-furnished room where she would live for the next 6 months. She didn't even have the strength to stand up, but she held herself well in front of Casio, acting like she had no weaknesses. That's what living like an aristocrat meant. And the peace of mind she'd chosen was meaningless. It couldn't compare to the value of the slightest reminder of Opilia. A couple of days before her death, Opilia called Casio to her, who noticed that the girl who always accompanied her like a shadow was not with her today. She had a request, and Casio was ready to fulfill her every wish. She could only ask him. It seemed to Casio that Opilia looked at everything in the world with contempt and wanted to say that she knew that there was not a shred of sincerity in the guy and acted like a normal person only in one case. It was then that Casio asked, did Opilia finally realize how useless Emilia was? But the girl closed his mouth by saying that if she had not met him in secret from her, she would have thrown him into the fountain long ago because she despised him, and not only him but everyone else. And whether she lived or died, she did not want them to come near her. Their conversation today had to be kept secret, for the most important secrets are revealed only at the end, and she asked him to listen carefully to what she wanted to ask him. She spoke a great many silly and incoherent words that day, but she looked as solemn as a prophet who was sure that after the typhoon, new sprouts would sprout in the distant future. In the evening, the dinner with the Countess was like a quiet night after a storm. As Casio had said, the Countess could not be bribed with any gift, for she was a noble and elegant lady. During dinner, she had told her nephew that he had been too lightly regarded, and that there was nothing more fickle than human emotion. Though he thought the world was simple, what he might encounter would easily become an impossible burden. The boy accepted her words without objection, though he was not typical of such humility, but her lectures were too long. After all, they had a guest, and the woman asked not to be bothered by her idle nephew's request and welcomed her into her mansion. The maid was glad that everything went well and could not believe that the Countess let her go so easily. Usually they discussed such things only with other maids, but the Countess was really a strict person, and sometimes it was very difficult to understand why she said this or that. Looking at the maid, Emilia noticed that she was smiling almost the same way as Dorothy, Nanny Odil's niece. The girl had grown up with her and Opilia. She often cried because she couldn't break up her and Ophilia's fights. Of all the maids, she was assigned the one who looked like silly Dorothy. Whether it was another of the lad's tricks, Casio she met again was different from before. For he smiled broadly, humbly apologized for his rude words, but immediately she interrupted herself. After all, if she thinks about him too much, she will be drawn back into the plot of the game. The maid said that the young gentleman had told her that he had reserved a boutique for her, and since there was no specific time, she could go there whenever she wanted. That same evening, Edmund asked one of his servants to send a bouquet of the largest, freshest, and most luxurious white roses to the boutique atelier by tomorrow morning, for it was a gift for a noblewoman. The next morning, Emilia and her maid Kitty went to the boutique. The girl thought that Casio would not have planned something like this, and especially no one could have predicted that Opilia would disappear. They were met by the owner of the boutique, who said that they should not be in a hurry to choose clothes, because they would not realize the true value of an outfit if they chose it in a hurry. And if they waited a little, they would be given the best tea and sweets. As it turned out in the boutique, there was another person also trying on clothes, so they only had to wait until they finished and look through the brought catalog. The maid was upset because the mistress had instructed Emilia not to make mistakes, but it sometimes happened because it was unwise to book a whole store before the season began. In addition, no one had informed them when she would arrive, so they decided to let in another customer. As it turned out, the other girl was Lady Elodie, and Lord Edmund had brought her a huge bouquet of white roses. Of course, Amelia realized that sooner or later they would meet, but she did not think so, and told Kitty that they should have gone back to the manor house and had the carriage ready. After all, it was better that they should leave together right away before she was noticed. However, at the same moment, Edmund became aware that there was a second customer, and noticing Emily asked what she was doing here. Emily did not understand why he was so angry, for even at Ophelia's funeral he was calm. She did not understand why she had to tell him what she was doing here and asked him to pull himself together, for his companion was also shocked. Elodie came up to them and apologized for what was going on, but Amelia said it wasn't something that could be solved with a smile or an apology. If she didn't know anything, she shouldn't have said anything. She was annoyed. Seeing the girl with Ophelia's face doing something she would never do made her heart grow cold. A furious Edmund almost lunged at the girl, asking how dare she speak to the lady like that, but Kitty the maid came to her defense. As soon as he saw Emily, he immediately became angry, began to criticize and almost attacked with fists. Not a small child, but only these words could stop him. She told him that if he was going to treat his companion like a gentleman, he should be kind and not be rude to others in her presence, or at least not get angry. If he can't even follow such simple rules, he shouldn't make a fool of himself in front of a girl who isn't even Ophelia. The boy fell to the floor in confusion. The girl looked at him, for she had knocked him down with just a few words, and hoped that he realized his guilt, for he was not the kind of man who could be easily deprived of the power of speech. She noticed that she had the same icy stare as Ophelia, and perhaps she knew it all. For she had asked him if idiots who said such things in front of a man who was about to die were worthy of life, and that jealousy, that love, was trash. And though he said he loved her, he easily believed that a completely different man was Ophelia incarnate. For it is Edmund who owns the ending where he changed the protagonist's name and kept her imprisoned. Then they left the boutique, where they were met by Casio, who had already prepared another carriage for Kitty. When Amelia left with him, she said that if he had been involved in the incident and had set it up to embarrass her, he should have confessed at once. But he said that the girl was wrong, because it was actually a coincidence since he had rented the whole boutique to avoid rumors and chance encounters. He didn't go in there, because if Edmund had seen him with her, they wouldn't have been able to avoid trouble. Casio said that Edmund was the stupidest of them all, because he caused trouble because he was too loyal to his instincts with only good support and manners. That's why they didn't get along. After Amelia met the girl from the rumors, she said that the one turned out to be very kind and also very beautiful. Ophelia died and people changed. Now everyone admired the girl as 2 drops of water like her. Ophelia was the most evil person in the world, and this girl was really kind and beautiful. But Amelia didn't need her because she wouldn't trade her friend for anyone else. Casio was curious about Lady Amelia's tastes in order to plan for the future, for he wanted to match his precious partner's tastes. Emily said that no matter who he imitated, he would be terrible at it, so he should stop, and asked what he had been so busy with all morning. In the legend of the country's founding, there's a goddess who blesses the kingdom, but the goddess was actually quite cruel. So much so that the royal family secretly stopped worshipping her and began to serve the supreme god Blitz. Also, the heirs were the eldest sons. That is, the priority was given to boys. The current royal couple has long tried to have children, but they had only one daughter, Princess Aloysiusa, who turned 20 this year. The queen was from the Principality of Aldrisa. Therefore, she has rather little power, because of which the king's brother, the Archduke of France, sought to get the throne. If circumstances arose, the law of succession said an exception could be made, so the queen raised her daughter harshly. But 8 years ago, a miracle happened. The queen gave birth to Prince Alexis, thus solving all the problems with the heir as everyone thought. However, the prince is still young, and the princess is rumored to be unsuitable, so the duke still has not given up the throne. And the king's health has been getting worse and worse since that day 5 years ago, and this social season will be the epicenter of the storm. Casio realized that even after his aunt had retired, she still cared about the situation in the palace, and next to her, he always felt like he was too much of an ignoramus. The woman said that words were enough because he couldn't even choose a normal partner. And if he wanted to, he could become a beau of the princess. The guy asked if she meant the coward hiding in the palace of Her Majesty the Queen. Casio also heard that Marquis Windrose's wife was going to go out again this year, and wondered if Marquis was going to give up the neutrality he was desperately clinging to under the pretext of his daughter's death, and whether Auntie could understand the feelings of parents who had lost their child. She knew that Casio liked the Marquis's daughter, but he was not the only one who liked her. One little gesture by a young lady, and not even a debutante, was enough to excite the high society. It was the first time in her life she had ever seen such a thing. Then someone even jokingly said that she was a goddess born in a human body and therefore doomed to die prematurely. She couldn't marry for health reasons anyway, but it would be nice to have the Marquis Windrose at her side. However, she didn't understand why he had brought Emilia Clare, to which the boy replied that there were rumors about how the Marquis Windrose family was hiding a treasure with hair the color of silver and eyes like emeralds, skin like snow, and a voice like music. Even the fact that she was condemned to die so early was proof that she was God's favorite, for many said if they got Ophelia's heart, they would be the happiest in the world. Sitting in the carriage, Casio did not tell Emilia what he had been doing all morning, but he said that they were almost there, and he thought the girl should have rested. Every time Emilia fell asleep, she dreamed of moments from her past with Ophelia. She woke up at night and went out onto the balcony, saying that she was dreaming because Casio was talking nonsense. But suddenly, Casio came up to her from behind and asked her what he was talking about. The guy explained that he had an emergency. Emilia replied that if it was true that there was a stray cat that could talk, wear a nightgown and open doors, he should add it to the Great Brahmandoff collection. Guy asked if it was absurd to make a living creature part of the collection, but nobles never particularly cared if it was alive or not, if it was something rare and beautiful. Even if Emilia debuted holding his hand and then became the most talked about lady of the year, she knew very well she shouldn't be in that position. Casio realized that she was again belittling herself as she always did, talking about herself as an outsider, frighteningly calm and to her face, even when they talked about the Marquise's marriage or family. Even when they brought up not only her crush, but the rest of the painful topics, she didn't even flinch. She wasn't afraid to leave, and she was going to leave everything she had gained and the people she was in close contact with. Her gaze was cold and disgusted, as if to say that she was fine and didn't expect anything from them. She felt that this was not her place, for her real power was not in small talk, and Casio would turn her from a beautiful lady into an unscrupulous monster with one word. She even sold her dead friend's name when she turned to him for help, and like a perfect gentleman, he tried to keep it a secret out of respect for the lady, but the information leaked out. Earlier, Casio prided himself on being good at understanding people's desires, but looking at Emilia, he didn't understand anything. She acted as if nothing had happened, and she didn't regret anything. She didn't show any excitement or greed. She behaved so much that she could deceive even herself. The girl approached him saying that all kind words sound like nonsense, if spoken with a face screaming that you are dying of boredom. Admiring how a weak man who has nothing fights to the end, she was not the kind of person who would fall into despair overnight and would not forget that his curiosity and kindness were bound only by Sophia. Emilia didn't believe him no matter how kind he was, for she didn't want him to say things he didn't mean just to shake her up. When the girl asked him to spare her the pretense, the guy realized that she really didn't know anything. Perhaps it was because they were used to communicating like this and decided to be honest with her. He said that he thought very highly of Lady Emilia because the members of the Marquis's family had also lost their peace. After her disappearance, no one knew that the girl would not come to Ophelia's memorial ceremony. He realized that even now there was nothing to keep her away but one thing. He said that letters had come twice for each Memorial Day, which was why he had been more active in his search since he had received the second letter. When she jumped emotionally to him, he noticed how her eyes changed at the mere mention of Ophelia. Usually she was calm and cautious, but when it came to her dead friend, she was as nervous as a mother who had lost her child. The boy did not know that she would show her true nature after the death of Lady Ophelia. He just did not understand. Did she think that this was her obligation? But after all, she gave the Marquis family much more than they gave her. And the girl didn't understand why he was so interested in the Marquis's family, but he was interested in the Marquis's family, which was broken by Emilia's departure. But he interrupted to say that there was a cold wind at night, so it was time for her to return. When Casio offered to walk her to her room, she refused, because she had grown up a child who was not afraid to be alone even if he had a nightmare, and the boy would have a hard day. Casio went to a meeting at the palace, to where rumors had already reached that he had refused to be the cavalier of the princess. The queen was furious. The rumors were not tried to control, but the woman clearly expected a different outcome. Some of them wanted to talk about Laertes, for he might soon become heir to Windrose. But it was too soon, for the Marquis had not mentioned adoption or a foster, but many already thought so. The king's younger brother, Archduke Franz, thought there might be trouble if Marcus joined the queen's faction, and they were all calculating together how likely it was that Duke Isaac, a member of the king's family, would unite with the queen, even though he had stepped aside 20 years ago when a natural disaster injured his son and affected the lands. If the king passes away, his 8-year-old son will become the new king since the law is on their side. The queen's faction is rather weak now, but if she has more people, she can change the course of things. The Queen of Life needs the Knights of Glamis after all. They got rid of the rebels who appeared in the kingdom 20 years ago, and if you believe the rumors, hopes to become the successor of the Marquis. Judging by his supporters, they will be able to unite the forces of the Marquis and the Knights. Then becoming the cavalier of the princess was useless. Many noticed that Casio was a good orator, and also treated the Brahmandov family who kept neutral. Unlike the Marquis of Windrose, who avoided direct involvement in political shakeups, the Brahmandov family was more intimidating. After all, they had their sights set on the throne. The fact that Casio was here, even though he wasn't going to take part in their plans, was quite unique. They began to tell everything they knew about Laertes, as the Hoff family only paid attention to the eldest son. The youngest was always left out, making the Marquise treat Laertes like her own child. They couldn't send people to him because the boy was known for his temper, and such an approach might not work. In fact, the princess was not that important, for their real enemy to fight was not the princess, but the queen and the prince. Even though everyone here knew exactly what they wanted, they were silent. The Duke is a coward who won't hear of throwing his nephew off a cliff to seize the throne, yet he can't let go of greed. Although everyone knew how the story of power-hungry politicians ended. The next day, Casio and Emilia were in the boutique choosing outfits, and she was trying on her third dress, while the maid was carrying the next one. She wanted to look at the catalog, but Casio wouldn't let her, because she would look at the prices. And since he was going to redeem himself for yesterday, she had to be ready. The guy was willing to spend whatever he could if he could see that look on Emilia's face. It didn't matter to him that he was like a black cat only bringing disappointment. She always looked surprised to see a piece of salmon, a toy, or a ball of wool. She should have had a life of luxury at the Marquis's house, so why was she so surprised by wealth? Opilia always wanted to do everything together with Emilia, and no matter what they bought, they both got similar things. To think a girl who lived like that left the Marquis's house empty-handed. As soon as he thought of her escape, he felt something strange. Something very similar to rage was brewing inside, and it was annoying. Emilia probably didn't know, but ever since she had disappeared, Laertes Hoff had looked very devastated. Nor did she know for certain that the Marquis had planned to persuade her to stay the next morning, or that the Marquis had fainted again upon hearing the news that Emilia had given the ribbon to her closest maid and left, taking only her suitcase with her. He was worried, thinking that perhaps she had already died somewhere, and words could not describe the surprise and happiness he felt when he saw her at the coffee house. Emilia said that she had enough dresses because if she had 10 bodies, she would not be able to wear them all, and she thought it was better to be moderate because it was all too much for her. And she wasn't Opilia. Casio thought that Emilia should always have plenty of exquisite jewelry as well as countless outfits, because his aunt said that 3 dresses in a season of points is not enough. The boy already liked spending money. A little later, he realized something. If he complimented her, she looked like she wanted to punch him in the face. And when he'd wave her off and start messing around, she'd open her mouth to object, but say nothing. Is it possible that she was trying to understand what was on his mind? Because when the truth is to be told, she is calm, and even if they are laughing and joking as they are now, there comes a moment when her expression changes again. So he just told her to take it as an opportunity to use his wallet, because after all, the Brahmandovs never throw money into the wind, which was nothing compared to his plans. The girl had been pondering this for a long time, or he would not have been so anxious to introduce her to high society. She wondered why he even wanted to invest money in making her a worthy companion. She didn't know the exact reason, but when she thought of Sir Gloucester, whom she had met in the check room, she realized that she would be an eyesore to some people just by entering the hall and holding his hand. She didn't know if it was due to the pain of loss or just an outburst of emotion, to which the boy said it would be easier for her to consider if he said he was just benefiting from it, and she was the only person allowed to talk like that to Casio himself. The girl was trying to put these deceptive thoughts into her head. That was the thing about people. When there was no temptation, no greed, they would be attracted to something. It didn't matter if it was gambling or alcohol or any other addiction, because the price for any choice was too high. If people couldn't take responsibility for it themselves, then it wasn't worth dumping it on others. She thought that Casio would just laugh at her and say, "Emilia, who do you think you are?" But she just wanted to prove to him that even in another life, they wouldn't have been a good match. She didn't understand how Casio could compare the others to Opilia, even though she was still in her right mind and sober mind. But she didn't understand why he was flirting with her if he was really chasing after Opilia. Of course, she might be wrong in saying that no one could compare to her, but Emilia was nothing compared to her, and she was still not that reckless. The boy didn't understand why she thought that about herself, so he asked her if she had any self-esteem, to which she replied that she had excellent self-esteem, which was why she was pulling Ophelia's hair. Casio was overcome by a strange feeling. In the past, he would not have paid any attention to her, because Ophelia's existence lit up everything around her, so Emilia was always around her like a shadow. The girl remembered that sometimes Opilia said that Emilia was prettier than her, and after that, she was not angry at the flattery at all. After all, the princess was comparable to a vixen, or a little girl who knew that she was the most beautiful in the world. Casio thought he was used to it by now, but such a familiar image when Emilia was in it looked completely different. But he did not understand how she took it all. The girl told how once Opilia burned the insides of a poisonous toad and put them in a goblet, and Emilia said she would drink from it, although she was incredibly angry. But after all of this, Opilia begged her not to drink it, which was kind of nice. And seeing this, she could understand people who were crazy about her. Though it wasn't the kind of thing that would normally be nice, but Casio would drink it too, if it was from Opilia. The girl thought that his feelings for Opilia had already cooled a bit, but the boy denied it, because his feelings had not changed a jot, and he should not jump to conclusions, despite the fact that they said that men were as fickle as the wind. The girl wondered if there was anyone who did not like Opilia. Emilia was someone who was considered just an accessory, although she tried to get a place next to her. The princess is sweet and kind, and the moment the Countess met Elodie, she wept when she saw her so much like her deceased daughter. Compared to Opilia, who was always sickly and capricious, Elodie was more suited to high society, and he did not understand how Emilia could be so calm. Hope was really something that was not like Opilia, hating with all her heart what she did not like, and passionately loving what Opilia liked. In her short life, she had refused, and hated being forced to do something she didn't like. But still, she met with one of the people she hated the most, and asked for a favor. She was like an unreachable snowy mountain, or a distant icy sea, cold and sullen like a snowy forest. Opilia Windrose was the only shining diamond in the world. It was incomprehensible what attachment breaks diamonds apart, in the hope that they will shine being a pile of sand. And who could make a shining person break and want to disappear? Opilia had always been a child receiving only love, and no matter what power fame and power offered, she was impossible to trade even for treasure or a comfortable life. Casio thought he knew her well, that human emotions were so simple and predictable. Yet there was something as deep and heavy as affection between girls, which was why he was jealous. After a time, Emilia was chatting with the Marquise, Casio's aunt, They were discussing that if she made her debut under the arm of her nephew, the most unpleasant thing would be the reckless speculations and rumors in society that would arise as a result. They would be that Emilia's origin was unknown, and that the problem could not be avoided, and if she was not presented as a bride, the noise would only be greater. The girl thought she was not worthy of the place, though the name of their family was advantageous to her. But if she looked at the social status to marry, she would initially stay in the family of Marquis and take his surname. Emilia also understood how important it was to take into account her opinion, because if the Marquise thought it was a disgrace, she had to take into account the shrewdness of Mr. Casio, who was more inventive than anyone she knew, and did so because he was sure that the profit would exceed all his investments. Auntie observed that Emilia knew her nephew very well, and if she knew him well only because she saw him so often, there was nothing left that Lady Citrine, who followed him to every banquet, did not know. Emilia, because she had seen everything in the game, would never believe that Casio was telling the truth, for he did not really love anyone and was obsessed only with Opilia, so he treated the player as a toy without showing affection. She had heard of this lady, for at the moment the only way to raise a woman's status in society was to marry, and even if there were glimmers of love between the partners, it was still a sham marriage. Emilia had no confidence that she could be as good a hostess as the Countess, nor did she have parents to support her. But she knew that Mr. Casio's standards were higher than anyone else in the world. Auntie, however, had noticed that a man of her character was hard to find even for money, and the dead lady had been very fortunate. For she realized that Miss Emilia was different from what people who did not know her said, and since she was closest to such a person as Opilia, the dead lady also had an eye for such things. It was the first time she had heard such words, and she wondered if she could be a blessing to Opilia, not just as half a mirror reflecting the light that came from her. If she was appreciated, she could follow her. At the same time, a bad ending was reached where a girl similar to Opilia was locked up by Lord Edmonds and begged for help, for she could not take it anymore. As the social season approached, gentlemen whose thoughts occupy the lady was beginning to take effect, it was true that one had to work hard from the very morning to secure a cavalier's place for a lady. Casio, on the other hand, met with Lord Edmund, telling the lad to give up the scheme of becoming Lady Elodie's cavalier. He told him so, though Casio was not actively trying to take the position, so he easily refused. Lord Edmund was already aware of everything, so he asked the boy to stop pretending, because the girl even lived in his residence, and she could not be just a candidate. However, who Casio was going to accompany him did not concern him. After all, they were not so close to even be interested in each other's affairs. Casio did not understand why this was a problem. Perhaps Edmund thought he wanted to try to get both Emily and Elodie at once. After all, in Edmund's opinion, no matter who said what, Elodie was so precious because she was Opilia. He was just another fool who mistakenly believed that all that glitters is gold, and he was so afraid of losing her as if Opilia had ever belonged to him in the first place. But Casio resolved the misunderstanding by saying that first, ladies choose their own suitors. It wasn't something they had the right to influence, they just had to take care of themselves and wait for the lady herself to honor them with the honor of being her escort. Casio, on the other hand, tried to dazzle Elodie with his flashy looks. After all, he didn't have the same merit as Lord Laertes because he used what he had, but he had heard that the Marquise was keeping the Baron's daughter, who had nowhere else to go, and didn't know any details about her partner, so he just tried to protect the lady's honor by becoming one of the candidates for her beau. Since he was related to the family of the Marquis, he decided to take their side to repay their favor, and he intended to support Lord Edmund in this matter because the girl could choose a partner on the recommendation of the Marquis. So the Lord asked her to calm down and think carefully. If the Marquise's family was shrewd enough, they would definitely choose someone like Edmund over an ordinary nobleman like Casio. And even if he was acting based on his instincts, it was good for Casio that he was a bit stupid when it came to his own feelings, because at least he could focus on the Marquis family for a while. He patted him on the shoulder, saying that if Edmund was willing to be so rude to him for his lady's sake, then if Elodie found out about it, she would be very touched, because he was the one who had discovered the diamond. Then he offered him a drink to celebrate their misunderstanding. Sir Edmund apologized for being extremely disrespectful to Lord Bramendorf, but they were not really that different. However, Casio no longer had any cards in his hand, and if it hadn't been for the chance Opilia had given him, and if he hadn't found Amelia walking away alone, there's no telling what would have happened to him. At the same time, Elodie entered Laertes' study, for she thought he had stayed up late, so she brought him a snack. She didn't ask the servants to do it, for they'd all gone to bed. She was a little hungry herself. A few days before, when she was looking around the castle, she saw a room that was locked, and the maid said it was impossible to get in. Elodie was surprised because it was the first time the girl had changed the subject so abruptly, and wondered what kind of room it was. Now she showed Laertes the medallion, saying that she had found it in the corridor of the second floor. She could not ask the marquise, and when she opened it, she remembered the day when she had just received the Countess's invitation, and realized that it depicted the same girl. She realized that the Emily she had met that day was the Emily who had lived in the room next to Ophelia's. Laertes remained silent and said it was too late for such talk, so she should go to her room and rest. His tone of voice was polite and kind, but it was clear that he was drawing a line between them. Out of respect for him, she decided to leave first, but said that next time she would not be satisfied with such a response. Laertes remembered how long ago he had met Amelia in the hallway, who had quietly snuck into the kitchen to sneak out and return everything to the way it was, because Opilia had mixed all the tea for the guests with earth. The guy said it would be difficult, but he would like to help her, and they started checking all the boxes in the kitchen. When Amelia was first bought, Opilia mocked her as much as she could, for if she had come there as her toy, she should have known her place, and she pushed her down, thinking that now she must be broken, and hoped that she would soon cry and beg for forgiveness, for it was to be expected as they were all the same. But the girl called her a damned wretch who did whatever she wanted to do because she was going to die soon. The girl was shocked, and they often fought during their quarrels, where Amelia said that she should be ashamed of herself because of her nasty character. She could not find friends and her parents had to buy them, or since she grew up in luxury, she could look at the others as ants. Now Amelia sat and remembered all these moments, because then they had really fought to the death. Perhaps that was why she was able to get rid of all the resentment in her heart. Now she heard the voice of Opilia, who thought so too. For Amelia had attacked her with such anger that she had nothing to do but to talk about it. But as soon as she turned around, the voice told her that it was not yet time to look. And on the water of the fountain she showed her another memory from her childhood. It was then that the girls were once again punished, and Laertes came to her, to whom Amelia told him that she thought that Opilia was making a fuss to get her kicked out, and said that even if he asked her to, she would not apologize. When Laertes said that he had come because he was worried about her, the girl cried, for she could not deceive herself. She couldn't accept his help because she had to bear the punishment like Opilia. She didn't care how nice the boy was to her, because even if he seemed to care about her, she couldn't forget that it wasn't her role. So she yelled at him and told him to stop being so sympathetic. If he didn't want her to be rude to him, he'd better leave, because to her that kind of hypocrisy was disgusting. She, on the other hand, hoped he would just hate her so she wouldn't have to think about how to improve things with him again. After that, the shabby guy left the basement, apologizing and reminding her to eat in the evening. Now, Amelia didn't understand why she was crying like that, because it hadn't happened even in her previous life outside the game, and did not understand why she was left with the memories of that life, because she could not change anything and was a shadow. The girl cried, but she saw Opilia, who said that Amelia was the only jewel in the world, and she did not think that her role was so trifling because she knew that since her birth, God had not been on her side. And the fact that Amelia had chosen her of her own accord was enough, but it was time for the girl to leave again. In parting, she told Amelia not to die, for if she came for her too soon, her friend would hate her. After she began to rise into the sky, Amelia woke up from a dream on her bed, and though it was not the first time she had dreamt of Opilia, however, such dreams were rare, and she didn't know what it meant. At breakfast, Casio noticed that the girl looked rather gloomy, and assumed that she was having a nightmare. The girl jokingly said that she had dreamt about 20 cockroaches, and that she was as uncomfortable in this situation as she was in her dream. However, the guy thought that she should have gotten used to having dinner together, because after all, he was her beau. But Amelia thought that it was better to pretend that they had a good relationship than to maintain the whole scandal of falling in love. She wondered if that was what Opilia had told her in her dream, if becoming Casio's partner meant putting her life in danger. However, she immediately reassured herself by saying that it couldn't be. During the social season, the ladies have picnics and tea parties, go shopping and opera, while the men entertain themselves with card games and casinos or horse racing. Although there are many places for entertainment, the one that attracts the most attention is the royal ball. The Grand Royal Dance in mid-May, where all the debutantes gather each year, is held in the Grand Hall, which is usually closed to the public. It was obvious that not only the clothes, but also the manners and the postures would be an object of discussion. But the girl was very shy because she was not going to dance with many unfamiliar gentlemen. But that did not mean that she would step on Mr. Casio's feet much more often. The girl noticed, however, that he now began to communicate with her much more honestly and casually. As time went on, she became more and more comfortable with him. Even though there were times when he avoided Ophelia's rather sly insults, even then he didn't seem as friendly. But the girl assumed it was only because he was easier with her than with her friend. She wondered about one detail of his plan, though. Did she need to stick to the mystery until the royal ball, or was it worth going to events to impress? Casio had already thought about it a lot, but he thought it was better not to do anything before the royal ball because it was obvious that Her Highness would also appear for the first time on that day. According to the rules, the official debut is on that day, and since Amelia was also going to debut, it was the best idea. But the girl was worried that the princess would debut on the same day as her. Initially, in the year when the player debuted, there was no princess debut. There was no opponent in the game capable of competing with Elodie, be it in looks, position, or character. On the part of women was a slight envy that caused silly plots and intrigues, but easily coped with them. The girl further increased the sympathy of the main characters to herself. She constantly received admiring praise, and if at the same time debuted Princess Elodie would be difficult to achieve such popularity. So Amelia was surprised because usually members of the royal family debut much earlier. In fact, she was right, because Princess Aloise attended the ball when she was only 5 years old, but disappeared after the queen gave birth to a prince. If you think about it, both Amelia and Opilia were turning 20 that year, and it was a coincidence that the lady she met in the boutique that day was also turning 20. Amelia thought that it was not customary to debut at 20, and wondered if the player in the game also debuted at 20. In the royal palace of Ancelot, there was a conversation between two maids. One of them had been there for a long time, but she still didn't know that the palace was divided into white and black palaces. The Black Palace was where the royal family usually stayed. In particular, the Grakender's palace was where the princess was educated as an usher. But since it was now empty, there was no need to go there. The maid was surprised because she definitely thought that there was someone there. At the same time, the queen was talking to the woman, for even after she had done what she had been told, His Majesty still had not woken up. The king was in a coma, and she didn't understand why he deserved it. The woman told her that even if they knew about the curse, they had offended the goddess, and devoted their lives to obtaining an heir, they should be satisfied with what they deserved. The queen, however, said that Alexis was still too young, and regardless of His Majesty's price, should have woken up. To which the woman replied that no more rites would have any effect, for it had been confirmed 20 years ago that the artifact was cracked. In Her Majesty's homeland, the place of the heir to the throne went to her younger brother. Only because she was a woman, she was almost banished from her homeland. So she decided to marry in this state and thought that fate had given her a second chance. But she had been married for 10 years and still had no children. It was explained to her that there were always problems with conception in the royal family, so she shouldn't take it too seriously. But the woman needed an heir to give birth to, and she couldn't just sit back and wait for old age. Finding some books in the library and reading them, she realized that this was completely different from the legends of the founding of the country that she knew. After all, long ago the first king promised the goddess to love only her, but he betrayed the goddess's love and had a child with another woman, after which the goddess cursed him. Eventually, the first king sealed the goddess, and it is said that even though her power was weakened, even when sealed in a sacred artifact, she continued to maintain the curse of the royal family for generations. Her hatred was so deep and strong that all members of the royal family born in an official marriage went mad, died young, or were born retarded. And though the king already had a child out of wedlock, a very healthy boy, the queen felt she could only trust herself. Therefore, she had to act. So now she was yelling at the woman to do something, and if the artifact was damaged, she had to find a way to fix it, because if she lost power, it would be very bad. 20 years ago, she brought her who knew how to handle artifacts and arranged a grand sacrifice after which countless people died in the country due to all sorts of natural disasters. The victims were not only the counties of Hold and the Duchy of Courtenay, but also many other lands in the kingdom. Did she really think that they would be safe if the truth was revealed? The woman would probably be fed to the wild beasts alive. If the young prince did not succeed in becoming king, they would die, for they were already in the same boat. There were unbelievers who said they were atheists. If the woman could not find a solution, the queen would take her nephew away, after which the woman thoughtfully said that she was not sure, but she could try something. Until now, the royal family secretly held ancestral rituals to get an heir. It was said that every time the ritual was held, the sealed goddess became easier to express her power on earth, and her wrath was causing great harm to the country. And it was believed that every time she was angry, a child was born who was a copy of the goddess. Born with a shard of her power, he is in many ways superior to ordinary people. If you find such a person and sacrifice him, you can use the power of the god again. However, no one knew whether the power would be granted by blessing or curse. The queen thought she was talking about the daughter of Marquis Windrose, but she was already dead, although she was beautiful as a goddess. But she was the kind of person who despises people, and there was no one in the country who did not know about the rumors that Lady Windrose was an exceptional person. But as it turned out, she wasn't the only one. And the disaster that followed the ritual 20 years ago was too great. She hadn't understood why, but now she seemed to understand, and handed her a paper with a picture of a girl the same age as the Marquis's daughter and one that looked exactly like her, so if she could be sacrificed, it might be possible to perform the ritual again. That same evening at the dinner party, Lady Elodie was chatting with the other girls, some of whom noticed that she had an unhealthy complexion, but as it turned out, she had just had a nightmare the previous night and had not slept well. The girls asked her to tell them what she had dreamt about. She remembered how in her dream she fell into a huge tunnel, where there were many huge dogs that were throwing themselves at her and trying to bite her. A dream in which she died a horrible death and was killed by a monster.